What is going on, guys? Jeff back here with Siegestyle and Project Xylus. I've got the Z here and we are getting ready to get started on the driver's side front fender. I'm going to show you guys from the ground up how I'm going to copy the fender that I made on the other side. Hopefully you guys have seen that. Go back and watch my last video if you haven't. And I'm going to be copying that onto this side and I'm going to show you exactly how I'm going to do it. But before we get into everything, I just want to say thank you guys so very much for all of your positive comments on the design of the front flare. I'm so happy that you guys like it. Most of you guys, I'd say 99% of you guys have come through and said that you love it. You think it looks great, and so thank you so much. That just blesses me beyond explanation. So thank you guys. I'm so glad to have your support. I'm glad you guys like it. I've also taken a little bit of the feedback that you guys have given me, specifically about the LED lights in the front. Thank you so much, guys, for letting me know what you think about that. I will not be putting the LED lights in the front there. I took a good look at it myself again and decided that you guys are absolutely right. It's not going to be a good idea to do that. I like it clean, so we're not going to be doing the LED lights in the front. I'm going to leave it nice and clean. We're going to be doing it on this side now, so I'm going to show you guys exactly how I'm going to do this. So believe it or not, the process of doing this is actually fairly simple. It is highly time consuming and very dirty work and definitely benefits from having an artistic eye, but overall it's really not that big of a complicated job. Basically what you're doing is just picking a section of the car that you want to design on and creating a plug on that shape by any means necessary. You can use clay, existing parts like this that we're going to use to kind of create a basic shape, wood like I use. Some people make these flares out of just tape. They just make like a tape plug. Cardboard is used. A lot of people use metals. Just whatever you have, whatever medium you want to use, you can create a plug. And once you have a basic plug or a shape, then you can fiberglass over it. And that will create a fiberglass shell. And that's when things really start to get fun. Is when you have your shell here, then you can get rid of the plug completely and just put the shell on, which is going to maintain that new shape that you created, obviously. So then you want to take that nasty looking fiberglass shell and turn that into something that looks showroom quality, you know what I mean? Super professional. And that's where all the drilling and cutting and sanding and all the detail work comes in. Like I said, a lot of people use a lot of different things, but this is the way that I do this. And it may work great for you, it may not work so great for you, but use what you have and get creative with it. It's very important. Another key thing to take into consideration when you start a project like this is you want to have a vision going in. You don't really want to get started on something and not really know where you're intending on going. You know, you can just start sculpting willy-nilly and come up with something cool, sure, but if you don't really have a vision, it's not really going to turn out quite to your expectation. At least in my experience, I found that the times when I just start randomly sculpting stuff and coming up with stuff, I'll finish it and yeah, it'll look okay, but then I'll take a step back and go, yeah, but that's not what I would have done if I would have taken a couple of minutes or a couple of days or a couple of weeks even or longer and really thought about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go with this project. So in my recommendation, take a little bit of planning time out and really think about the direction you want to go before you start your process on this. My style tends to be more organic. I like to follow the body lines of the car. I think that the Z in particular is a beautiful, beautiful body design, very organic, round type of shape to it that I really like. And so in designing my flares, both the front and the back, I definitely wanted to play off of those lines, those body lines, and that nice organic shape in my creation, in my design for the flares. Now, a long time ago I uploaded a video of sculpting on a little Model Z, and that was my vision. I showed you guys exactly what I wanted to do, and while there are some differences, naturally, there's always going to be differences between your concept and your final, but even though there were a few differences, the final shape and the final vision was still in line together. So that's kind of why I like to say take a little bit of time out and plan, and whatever your style is, another key thing to keep in mind is that it's your style. You know, do what you want to do and make it yours. That's the most important thing. Don't care what anybody else says about your thing. Just go out and do it, have fun, and see what you can come up with. Fiberglass is an amazing, amazing compound. It's an amazing tool that you can use to create pretty much anything. As long as you can create the basic shape of something to fiberglass over, you can make anything. Like you can make giant box flares if you want. You can do, you know, any manner of shape that you want. The difference between, say, like a Rocket Bunny design flare and like an old school box flare is all just in the details. You know, it's just two different artists' interpretation of what a flare should be. I'm going to show you the way that I do this, the way that I achieve the look that I have on the other side on this side. Now, as was the case when I sculpted the back over fenders, in the front here I'm going to use sculpting clay. And sculpting clay is one of my absolute favorite tools in a lot of different art projects, just because you can make anything with it. I mean, if you have the imagination, you can sculpt it into anything. So I use that clay in this process to get a lot of those curves, a lot of those natural organic looking curves, and to follow the body lines perfectly and all that. Clay is one of the greatest tools that you can use, I'm telling you what. So consider using clay, and you will see how I use it to create all the detail in the front. All the front cap forward and the back portion, that was all sculpted in clay before it was fiberglassed over. So you can imagine, if you can sculpt something in clay, you can fiberglass over that and it will take that basic shape. Then you just put body filler and sand it and get it really nicely detailed, and guess what? You got a nice sharp looking piece. Sky's the limit, man. Clay and fiberglass are two of probably my two favorite art mediums for sure. It works great. It applies wonderfully to auto body projects like this, I have found. As I mentioned before, I believe, I used to do a lot of costuming and cosplay and stuff like that. So I would make costumes. I would make helmets and armor and stuff like that. And that's how I really learned how to use the clay and fiberglass with it and stuff like that. But let me tell you, it didn't take long before I went from very basic stuff to making really nice, complex, highly detailed stuff. Anybody can do it. So just do a little bit of practice. Like, before you even jump into a project this big on your own car, do some practice. Get some clay, some oil-based clay, and then sculpt something up and then try to fiberglass it and see what you can come up with. And the same basic principles apply to doing something like this when it comes to clay. Now, we're not only going to be using clay, keep in mind, we're going to be using other things as well. It'll be a combination of things, as I mentioned before. We're going to be using that polyurethane flare. It's just a universal flare that you can buy online. Any brand will do, really. I'm only using it basically to get a base for my extended width, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the wood pieces on the outside of it, and then we're going to fill in clay. We're going to use clay to do the front portion and the rear portion, all the detail in that area, because obviously the universal flare is nothing like what it's going to end up being. So I have to use clay to actually set all that detail in, and then we're going to fiberglass over everything. So really, it's not that complicated when you take a step back and you look at the whole thing. Oh yeah, it's not that complicated. Just basically make it on there and then fiberglass over it and then just detail it, fine tune it. So anyway, I think you guys get the gist of it. Sorry for a little long spiel there. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you guys first all of the stuff that I'm going to be using. Everything from the tools that I use, drills, Dremel, palm sander and all that, and regular hand sandpaper, to packing tape, wood, the clay, body filler, and all that. So let me show you guys, whip the camera around. Okay, so on the ground here next to the car, I have essentially everything I'm going to be using to do this project. It's not everything. I don't have my fiberglass cloth or my resin over here, but I have pretty much everything else. Now we're going to go ahead and start with the universal flare that I explained before. I believe the brand on this one is Icon, but like I said, you can use pretty much any brand, and you do not have to use this, okay? I only use this just to give me a base to start on. If you don't have something like this, don't worry, you can still do this without this. Say, for example, just putting wood right up on the sidewall of your fender here. If you wanted to do that and just build it out with wood and then just use body filler to fill in the shape, you can do that perfectly well. I just like to use this thing here to give me a little bit of an extended sidewall right there. I don't know, it's something I've done already, and I like the way it works, so I tend to use that. But like I said, you don't have to. But beside that, we've got our wood here that I'm going to be attaching to the side of the sidewall to give me even a wider width, because this width right here will not be substantial enough for the width that we're going for. So I'm going to use this wood right here, and I'm going to actually tape it onto the universal flare itself to give me that little bit of extra width right there, as you can see. Then we're going to be fiberglassing over the whole thing and filling in that gap right there, or the difference, that little 45-degree angle right there, with body filler and smoothing it out. So I have several pieces of wood, little wood segments right there to do that with. One of the most important parts of this whole process is packing tape. You want to have a lot of this stuff to protect your paint if you care about your paint. We're going to be masking this entire portion off. Basically the entire fender completely, and the headlight will all be thoroughly wrapped, about 3 layers of packing tape, and all down through the side skirt. We're going to be covering the wheel hub and anything that you don't want resin or fiberglass or anything like that to get onto. You got to protect it, and this stuff right here is fantastic for that. So we're going to be using ample amounts of the packing tape to not only create a barrier between the paint and the plug, but also the plug and the fiberglass shell that we're going to be laying on top of the plug. Now for the clay portions, the packing tape is not going to cover over the clay sections. It simply won't adhere to it. So in order to protect that from the fiberglass, we use something called PVA, which is this right here. Now PVA is basically the stuff that you find in Elmer's glue that gets hard. It's kind of like a film. It dries to a film type of consistency and creates a nice barrier. It's still a flexible film, but it works perfectly on clay. You can just brush it right over your clay sculpt and it will create a nice hard film, and that will protect from the fiberglass as we go in and lay up our fiberglass right over the clay. Moving on from the protective stuff, we have a nice tailoring measuring tape here. This works wonders for when you're doing any kind of sculpt and you need the lines to be perfect, especially when achieving symmetry between two sides as we are here. I can use any kind of body line or anything like this, any point from inside the wheel well or anything, to get exact measurements with that tape, and because it's flexible I can get around any body lines to get my lines exact. For example, I can take a measurement on the other side and then come over here and take the exact measurement and know exactly where something needs to be on this side. So it's very handy to have a long flexible measuring tape, something like this. You can get it at a craft store for a couple of bucks. Of course, we have lots of tools, namely the rotary tool, the Dremel. Any brand will work so long as it does the same thing. You can change the bits. I have a bunch of different types of bits. I use mostly just the cutting wheel and the sanding drum like that, but I have an assortment of different bits that I use for different purposes. Very, very handy tool, and in fact probably the most important tool in the entire thing. We have the drill. We're going to be doing our drilling for our mounting points. We drill into the body of the fender itself and also into the over fender, of course, to make our mounting points. You use a couple of different drill bits for that. A smaller one right here to do the hole into the over fender for my screws, and then I use the bigger one right here to put my riv nuts into the fender itself. So a couple of different bits there that I will go into detail once we get to that point. That's not going to be for quite a while because we do drilling pretty much last. And of course, the palm sander, man, the good old palm sander. You're going to be doing a crap load of sanding on this thing, and which actually brings me to another point. Anything in your work area that you want to protect from dust and all that, make sure it's covered up, because this is going to get dusty. Let me tell you, this is a dirty, dirty job, as I was saying before. But a good palm sander will work wonders for sure. You don't necessarily have to have one. You can probably get the entire job done without one, with just hand sanding, but definitely makes your life a lot smoother in certain circumstances. It works a lot quicker than a hand sand, but you do not want to use it in every circumstance. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble with a palm sander if you don't know what you're doing, but it's nice to have one, so make sure you got one on standby. It's my suggestion anyways. As I'd mentioned, hand sanding will definitely be a part of this as well. All your detail stuff, all your real fine detail stuff will be hand sanding. I like to use a nice soft detail sanding tool like this. It's got hook and loop fastened on the back, and then I just use these sanding discs here, and I just fasten them on here and just do all my detail work like this, all in the little corners and everything with a tool like that. I also have a hard rubber straight block, sanding block like this that I use a lot for like the sidewall and stuff like that. And then I have these nice soft sponges in various densities, some super soft and some nice and firm, to get my curve details and stuff like that. So just a variety of different sanding tools makes this job a lot easier. So get yourself a nice little bevy of sanding tools. We're going to be using a lot of body filler. This is what's going to smooth out our fiberglass a lot, and it takes shape beautifully well as you sand it. I use a combination of Bondo glass and regular Bondo. This is to I actually use them independently, and then I mix them together as well in certain cases. I use the Bondo glass in the more sensitive areas like the sidewall area, any areas that take a lot of pressure like the mounting areas, any place that's liable to take more abuse than typical. I'll go ahead and use the Bondo glass, which is a little bit of a stronger type of a body filler. It actually has strands of fiberglass in it, and it just hardens to a little bit of a harder type of consistency. So I use that in the more sensitive areas. It's more pricey than the regular stuff, so you don't want to use that on the whole thing, and it doesn't quite sand as easily as the regular stuff too. So use this only in the areas that it really benefits from. The regular stuff is going to be your workhorse filler. Use that with pretty much any area. It's strong, it's great stuff. It's very basic, it's very simple stuff. Like I said, I like to cocktail them, and you get a little bit of a mix of both. So it's stronger than the regular filler, but also a little bit easier to sand than the Bondo glass by itself. So you get a little bit of both worlds. So it's really nice. I also, of course, have body filler applicators in several different sizes. I like the flexible rubber ones. It makes my life easier. And a couple of different body filler mixing things. I have this well-worn piece of ABS plastic, or not ABS, but styrene plastic, and then a piece of cardboard wrapped in some tin foil. You want to mix on something that is not porous so that your mix doesn't get out of whack, because it definitely can if it seeps into something porous. Like, don't just use a piece of cardboard and then mix over cardboard, because it'll actually seep into the cardboard and it can throw your mix off, and that can be a headache. So I use hard surfaces, or a piece of cardboard that has like a tin foil or something that's non-porous wrapped around it and taped. You can actually tape up cardboard also with this masking tape, and it works wonderful for that. I also have some glazing and spot putty here. This is for filling pinholes that will appear. There will be numerous pinholes and stuff, because naturally in the mixing process of the body filler, it forms little bitty air pockets in there as you apply it, and those little bitty air pockets translate into pinholes in your final sanded shape. So I like to go over the final shape with that glazing and spot putty at the end, and just fill in any little pinholes, as many as I can possibly find. And there's a ton of them, trust me, there will always be a ton of them, but that stuff works great to fill those pinholes. In the back there, we've got chip brushes. I've got 2-inch chip brushes, which is my go-to size for pretty much any project. I just buy a big old box of them at Harbor Freight. I believe there's 26 of them, or 36 of them in there for like $10. And I've gone through so many boxes of those, I can't even remember how many I've bought. But you will need chip brushes for mixing your resin, and you will go through several pots of resin in this process. So get a box of chip brushes. That will help you a lot. There's my big old stack of clay right there. That's the very same clay that I used to sculpt the flares in the back. And I did a lot of the sculpting in the front with that stuff as well. It's great. I've got, as I'd mentioned before, probably 10-15 pounds of that stuff, and it's great. It works wonderful. So it's an oil-based clay. I can just use it as many times as I want. Just keep it relatively clean and you're good. But this is essentially what you need besides your fiberglass and your resin. You need that as well, but this is what we're going to be using. This little bucket right here is my hardware. It's my nuts and bolts and stuff, and I'll get into all that too when we get there. Okay, so this is essentially what I'm going to be using to get this project started. Now over here at my Mad Scientist table, I have all of my mixing stuff that I'm going to be using. For the resin, I'm going to be using just 3M standard fiberglass resin. It works really well. There's no bells or whistles to it. It's just a pretty standard resin, but it works good. I'm also going to be doing a gel coat, top coat over the fiberglass, so I'm going to be using unwaxed white gel coat for that, as I have used in the past. Make sure when you're buying this stuff that you get the unwaxed version and not the waxed version. I have a little bit of older stuff there, and I just bought a fresh batch here, so I should have plenty for this project. Of course, you want mixing cups and stirring sticks, things like that. That'll make your project a whole lot easier. And then of course, safety is always very, very important, so make sure you've got a respirator with some good filters on it, and yeah, I think that should about do it. Chip brushes, like I said, make sure you got plenty of chip brushes because you're going to need them, and then just your fiberglass itself, which you can use really any kind you want so long as it's not too thick. I like to use 6 ounce or 6.5 at the most so that I have a nice thickness to it, but it's not so thick that I can't get it around corners and bend it around and get some detail out of it when I lay it up. So I usually do my 2 layers of fiberglass cloth on the top. I will show you that when we get to that point. And then underneath, after I have the shell made on top, I oftentimes like to support the shell underneath with fiberglass mat, which has a little bit more of a stiffer consistency to it. It's not really meant for detail stuff, but it's really nice and strong for flat surfaces, so a lot of times I'll throw some fiberglass mat up underneath, and again I will show you all that when we get to it. So with the mixing stuff and all the chemical stuff combined with all the tools and all that, you have plenty to get some over fenders made for your car. So that's going to be the gist of what we need to do this project. I'm going to go ahead and end this video right now because it's already 20 minutes and I don't want to keep going too long on this video, so I'm going to break it up right here. Sorry that there's not a whole lot of action in this one, guys, but this is a nice little preempter to get us started on our project here. When we do get started in the next video, we're going to start by doing some template work. We got to take some templates from the other side here. I'm going to end up taking a Sharpie marker and some masking tape and doing some templating. I don't even know if that's a word, but we're going to be making some templates of the curves and stuff like that, basically the outside lines, and we're going to translate those as best as we possibly can over to the other side. So that's going to be the first part of the actual process of doing this, guys. So stay tuned. I will have more videos up very, very quickly. The process has officially begun, and I am recording everything. So stay tuned, guys. I'll have something up for you again very soon. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll come back for the next one. Peace.